Welcome. Welcome. I see our live button up there. Welcome to our 5th podcast of womenwhowine.edu. A little bit of background before I introduce our 5 formidable wine drinkers. We are a group of women who, here's our tagline, we value the innovation and research in higher education, and we like to discuss this while we sip on wine. Tonight, we are going to have a topic about something that has come up quite a few times in the last couple of podcasts, as well as in conversations among us offline. And before I get to our topic, however, I want to introduce everybody, and then we'll move on into podcast number 5. So Patrice, are you there? Give a little wave since we have the there's a fabulous trio who are joining us from, where are you?
Niagara Falls, Canada. Ah.
Niagara Falls, Canada. So Patrice is waving. She's got she's normally in upstate New York, so she was close enough to join Laura and Jess. She works at Cornell and Digital Initiatives. And next to her, Jess, give a toast.
Hello.
We've got Jess Knott. Jess drove how many hours?
More than I expected. 5.5. So
5.5 to make it to Niagara Falls. Jess is normally at the University of Michigan.
No.
I'm sorry, Michigan State. Michigan State. Take it back. Well, there's going to be hell to pay. And works in learning design there at Michigan State University. And then finally next to her is Laura Pasquini. Laura is busily tweeting and texting as our back channelist. Laura is normally at the University of North Texas, but she is a Canadian and is visiting those Canadians. So she's up there with, yeah. You guys want to tell us a little bit about why you're there? Wait, actually, let me just introduce Tanya, and then we'll get back to you, because there's obviously a backstory that people watching would be interested in. Tanya is also joining us from her normal location, which is in Wisconsin. Tanya is the co-director and PI of the National Center for Distance Education and Technological Advances, otherwise known as DATA. And let's go back to the ladies on the bus. Tell us where you guys are and why you're all up in Niagara Falls.
So we did a little on-location wine touring today, and we visited 2 sisters, Pillar Estates, and then for a little beer tasting, we went to Silversmith. And like you said, Nori, I'm only 3 hours away, so it was a quick trip and a great opportunity to have a chance to hang out here in Niagara Falls while Laura was here visiting her parents, and Jess was kind enough to not know how far away she lived from Niagara.
He's actually like 4.5 hours, so I don't know where that extra hour went. So.
Just construction, and the guy at the bridge, honestly, he was like, "Why are you going to Canada for 12 hours?" And I said, "Podcast." And he kind of brain broke, and he was like, "Are you on iTunes?" I was like, "No, we're on YouTube." And then he let me into the country. So apparently podcasting is the way to cross borders. So I'm from Niagara Falls, Canada. So we're actually in an RV to honor a long weekend coming up in May. So May has a Canadian long weekend. It's called Victoria Day, or we call it the May 2-4 weekend. So you grab a case of 2-4, your favorite beer of choice, and you go to the cottage and lake or camping, and you play a little song. So yeah, we're here, and they've graciously joined me on this adventure for today, so thank you. We're in an RV because we're proper camping today.
We had hoped to maybe broadcast from a vineyard, but we couldn't find reliable Wi-Fi.
Because in Canada, you should just be having wine and not be on anything internet.
Yeah.
I think a vineyard is, or it would be fantastic, but I think the RV is, it's kind of our style.
Exactly.
Excellent. So, our topic today is
You want to share drinks first, or no?
Oh yeah, of course. We're already drinking. I guess I forgot to. The other people want to join us. Who wants to start? Why don't we go from bottom up? Laura, you want to tell us about what you're drinking?
Yeah, in my Le Bat Bleu glass. It's not Le Bat Bleu. I'm drinking an open, smooth red from the Peninsula. It's the mind that opens to a new idea and never returns to its original size. So it's a nice big blend. VQA, you can only get here, so I might have stockpiled in previous photos. But that's just for a long summer ahead of us here in Canada. So we're going to enjoy some of this. And I'm here because the nice Niagara University and Western New York advising crew, I'm going to their conference tomorrow, their technology conference, and to work with the advisors in technology. So I'll be there at Niagara University, so thank you for sponsoring this trip this way.
Very cool. All right, Jess, why don't we go in reverse order?
Well, I got a Chardonnay that Laura handed me out of the refrigerator because I was unprepared, not only for traveling to Canada, but also for drinking.
Let's talk about it now.
Well, it's from
This is the first wine in a couple of months. You've been drinking the brown. Good for you.
The brown?
Oh, bourbon.
Oh, bourbon, yeah, well, I left that at home. So,
All right, so tell us about your white wine.
it's apparently a deal with grilled chicken or pork and soft white cheese. And it tastes really nice. So,
Awesome.
And so Laura did a little shopping before we got here. Some of you may have seen the photos on Facebook, and she gave me a selection that I could choose from for a red. And I could not resist the Dan Aykroyd wine. And it is a lovely red from 2013 that is a Cabernet Sauvignon. And I would like to note that after our session tonight, Laura's mom was kind enough to make a chicken parm dinner for us, and so I just want to shout out to her for hosting us and cooking us dinner, and she's totally awesome, although I haven't met her yet.
Hello to Colleen and Mike,
Yes.
MNC.
Yes. And Mike was kind enough not to run the power tools during our podcast.
That's a good, tough choice. You never know when it interrupt us, yeah.
thanks for the RV.
Awesome. Tanya, come on, Tanya, break a streak. What are you drinking tonight?
Oh, she's muted.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Now I
Sorry.
can.
I just want to clarify. So you guys have been wine tasting and beer tasting already today, right?
For about an hour.
Some of us were designated in private.
I'm very, very jealous.
Yeah.
So I am breaking a streak only because I stopped at the corner store yesterday and they were out of my normal wine. So I went with the Cupcake Red Velvet, one of my other go-tos. It's usually Cupcake, Menage a Trois, or my James wine. Love the darks. So I had some left over. So that's what I'm kicking off today with.
Very
I
nice.
should mention, we talked about podcasting from a vineyard. You know, if there's any vineyard people listening and would like us to come podcast at your vineyard, I'm sure we would really be down with that.
We do not care what region. We'll go to any part of the United States.
Or outside of the United States.
Yep, true.
Totally
Sure.
down with it.
Australia, there. New Zealand.
New
Great.
Zealand.
Yeah, New Zealand has some.
Iceland. I want to go to Iceland.
Mm.
All right, let me take this up with my wine. I'm always trying to pour something unique, but I went to an old standby, and you'll never guess, it's a Pinot Noir. Ha. This one's called Poppy, and I've been finding it for the last couple of years at the Packing House Wine Merchant, which is the local wine cellar in my town, where I am in Southern California in Claremont. But I just found it at my local grocery store, so I bought a couple. It's a nice Monterey Pinot. I always like the low alcohols. It's really delicious. And I like poppies. That was, when I got married, poppies were the theme of my wedding. So with that, we all have drinks in our hand. We all know where we are. I hope our folks out there who are joining us have something wonderful in their glass as well. Because tonight we're going to be talking about a topic that keeps coming up. We talk about women advocates. We talk about advocating for one another. We've talked about issues around women leadership. But we noticed that we have so many men who join us, and so many men who join our podcast or who have come to some of our conference sessions. And we've been talking for a while about having an event like tonight, where we really want to focus on the men who have supported us in higher education and how that plays out with some of the topics that we've discussed. So with that, I want to go into a story that I was telling Tanya and Mark Askren and Mary Nemec last week when we were together in Nebraska. And we were sort of talking about like this upcoming episode, and we were going to be talking about men. And Mary Nemec pointed out that there's a difference between a mentor, and there's a difference between a mentor and an advocate. And I had been talking about a mentor, and I've brought him up several times in this program about how he really helped shape my career and helped really like buoy me in times where I really didn't have a direction, and he really was there to kind of hold up a mirror and show me some of my strengths and how I could move forward as a leader. And what Mary mentioned was that mentors and leaders, or mentors and advocates, are slightly different, and that at work, men can be your mentors in sort of a formal or some kind of a relationship where they do, as my mentor Bob Blackney did, where he really helped to develop my career and helped push me in the direction of leadership. But advocates are probably in your lives all the time. They're people who are there just to help you along the way in your day-to-day job and help with promoting you within your own institution and outside of that. And I thought there was a distinction about this kind of more formalized relationship with mentors and advocates, and I wanted to open with those two lines of thought today as we go through. And then as we continued, I started telling a story about my mentor, who I won't belabor the point because I've talked about it on this show often enough. But I did point out that in my career early on, there were two different women who were probably the most false mentors I'd ever had. And I wanted to share how, because we don't really talk about the negative aspects of women, but I wanted to open with this sort of like caveat. There were two women who worked with me at some point, and both had early on taken me on as sort of a mentee and really singled me out and said, oh, you're going to be a fantastic leader, and you're just like me when I was younger. And I hadn't noticed that there was something in this for them, and they weren't really careful about what was in it for me. And I had, in both of those situations, these women sort of turned on me because what they wanted was actually an apostle. They wanted me to adore them. They wanted me to really just serve them in a way that promoted their career, but ultimately it didn't promote me at all. And I wanted to sort of tell that story because it wasn't about males in my career. It was actually specifically about two women who were in my career, and how that contrasted with the person who ultimately helped develop me, and that this particular person was a man. So I want to get back to the advocate and the mentor, and I thought we'd start our round today with people who have been formal mentors, or perhaps informal mentors, or maybe stories with people, men who in higher ed have advocated for you in your career.
I can talk about a mentor I have, and it's weird because it's my boss, but I had a couple of conversations with him this week. If any of you listening have ever met Ryan Yang from Michigan State University, he's the assistant director in teaching and learning at MSU, and it's been a tough couple of weeks, figuring out a lot of different stuff, changing roles and all of that. And I mean, I've been in his office no fewer than 5 or 6 times in the last couple of weeks saying, I don't know what to do. And what's really useful and cool and supportive is that, I mean, he sits and he listens, and then he tries to offer some sort of solution, like, did you think about this, or did you try this? But there are times when he just says, I don't know what advice to give you. Here's what I see. How can I help you come to that conclusion, or the conclusion you need? And sometimes all I need is somebody to tell me I'm not nuts, because I can be pretty performance driven and I can get a little nutty. But he has been there for me in my role since long before I was a manager, since I was in instructional design. I had just started in the field teaching me what that looks like. And to see him evolve as he's helped me evolve is a true mentorship relationship that I feel truly grateful to have, and is one of the just key things that keeps me at MSU. I'm thankful every day that I have that. So that's my mentor piece. I have an advocate too, but I want to hear more about.
You're totally sucking up.
That's the thing.
I love Ryan. He's great. I'm just kidding.
He also has seen the bad stuff. There's not always sucking up. So, and that's how you know it's real, right?
That's true. That's actually a really good point. He's seen all sides of you and still is willing to advocate and mentor you.
Still is okay.
Yeah, we actually had a talk because Patrice and I before we just kind of deciding the glass we want for wine here, and we were talking about the difference between a mentor and an advocate, and I guess we have different stories. So I would say my person would be more of a mentor because he was a faculty member who went back into administration. So he was a history professor who returned to University of Toronto, Scarborough. Curtis Cole, he's awesome, and he is an amazing man who decided I'd like to work with students to help them persist, and he worked as a director for advising and career center. So our center did a lot of student development sort of things, and we did career and employment and study skills, and he wanted to work with departments and faculty. And his background was funny enough that he mirrored mine, where we worked in residence life and housing, and then we went into different kind of functional areas and he knew that I was looking at faculty and down the road, but in his work he said, you need to be part of this profession in academic advising and go to this NACADA group that's in the US, even though it's not quite the same, but to be part of a profession. And so he mentored me in the way of being part of that group and also taking choices and projects. Or he said, if you want to pilot something, then pilot it and describe what you want to do and have an outcome and share that, and let's figure out what's going to work for you. And he was very specific to people, and I think it was one of the most impressive leaders that he got out of the way when someone was doing good work. He's a leader that was like, great, how can I help you do that? And also challenge me at, have you thought about this and this, or this is the best approach, because we have a challenging group sometimes, and maybe you need to do this first, or come up with a pilot, or come up with a description for your project plan. And as a new professional in higher ed, I think that was very helpful, and I'm very grateful for him because he made me think about things in different ways, and he challenged me on some of the things. So he was a supervisor, and it doesn't always have to be a supervisor, but he just happened to be. And he was also the supervisor where I could talk to him about the Trailer Park Boys, which he secretly loved. And to look at him as the suit, white guy, white hair, and a suit, and I was like, you like Bubbles? And someone in our staff actually went to school with Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys. She's from the East Coast. Yeah, you know.
I'm from Michigan.
Exactly, since we're in an RV and all. And yeah, and I think he was one that's been one that I've reached out to as I've progressed into different things and left the path of. He's the U of T registrar now, and he's a person I go back to as a sounding board and advice. And I guess I would say he's a mentor. And Patrice, you talked about your individual, and you said, well, maybe mine's an advocate. And
so I would just take a step back before I even got into higher ed. So I grew up with my brother and my father, who were both mentors and advocates, I think, depending on how we define them for me. And it was really my brother who encouraged me to go into engineering. And my first engineering job, I mean, the men that were all around me were very supportive. So I think, I had always been around a very supportive male network that always encouraged me and mentored me and went out of their way to say, somebody needs to do a presentation for the president, you should do this. Or this is a high-profile project, you should do this. So I think my expectation was always that men could be mentors. It wasn't like something unusual. And when I left engineering, this is my story into higher ed, is I was actually on a girls' weekend at a place called the Sagamore, which is outside of Lake George, New York. And we just happened to be chatting up with a guy who was at the bar, and it came up that I had an MBA and an engineering degree. And he was like, oh, do you want to come teach a course? And so that's actually how I got into higher ed, was through that unusual by chance meeting. But he turned out to be a mentor for me, and he's the one who planted the seed of, you really need to go back and get your PhD. He provided all sorts of guidance as far as progressing into, faculty positions, all the way to, this is the healthcare that you should do, or this is when you should use personal time and vacation time, or this is how you should navigate the ropes. So I mean, he was I would say was definitely a mentor for me.
I would say Ryan teaches me how to be a grown-up.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, well, here's where you have chronic migraines, you should use FMLA for this, and that's advocacy and mentorship, right?
Yeah.
And he's also the first one to be like, that idea maybe isn't so good. I wouldn't say that in public. Let's figure, you know, the challenging piece that you mentioned. He's the first one to be like, yeah, okay, hold on.
But I think, right, whether they were a mentor or an advocate, I think it's that they're people who are there to support you and bring you up and push you forward. And to your point, I mean, it's not always a professional thing. Many times it's personal things. And I don't think we can stress enough. I mean, having somebody when you're first starting in your career guide you through sign up for your pension now, put as much money away as you can now.
So that's my father who you've seen today. Yeah, no, he's been one of mine.
Like
yeah,
that
advice
is
like that.
huge.
He's walking around outside somewhere.
He is. I'm worried he's going to jump in here. So just be warned. He looks like Robert De Niro.
And Laura.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, Patrice, because I know we've talked a lot about our career development, but there are a lot of things that are mystifying at the beginning of your career. And while you're in those entry-level positions, trying to get to sort of mid-management without really understanding what that is, which would have been my case. Like I kind of knew there were like people that were the most highest people in the organization, but it took me a while before I really navigated. Yeah, you know, way up here, like the president. I can remember sitting with a friend, and I was telling her, break it down for me. And we were in a cafe, and she had a cup full of creamers, for like coffee creamers, and she like mapped out like the whole academic structure with coffee creamers to just explain to me, like, all right, so there's the provost, and there's the deans, and there's the... I was like, oh, I get it. And org charts, like just having people help you out with those things. But I was going to jump in and say the difference for me between the mentors, which I've heard you echo some of the same things, people who give me personal advice. You know, my mentor, Bob, would, you know, he took me in an office once and just said, you cannot die on every hill. Like, your passion is what makes you wake up in the morning, and you come to work ready to fight every battle, and you're so proud that you do that. You know, like you think it makes you special. But a real leader, like, picks the hill that they're really going to die on. And as your career accelerates, you can't be passionate about every single issue. And that was really personal advice, and he was not, it wasn't quite scolding, but he was really emphatic. Like, you won't advance if this is the personality you bring every day. If all you're here to do is derail everything because you're arguing, you're just not going to be perceived as passionate. But then I've had advocates who are different. Like, they'll advocate for me within the structure. And they'll be somewhere like my friend Brian Best, who may be tuning in right now, Bro Best. He's the kind of guy who will advocate for you wisely. If he's somewhere and there's something that goes on, he knows the women in his life, and when he's in a meeting and can promote somebody and say, hey, you know, that's something Erin could do, and she'd be phenomenal, and, you know, just find the right time using his voice and his esteem within the community, and advocating for the people that he knows would resonate the best in whatever the situation is at the time. And those are those informal advocates that they're huge. And that's what I think when the men who are coming to our sessions, I don't know that we can really do like formal mentoring, but these advocating roles. Go, jump in. I see your
From the interwebs. That was my no. I was just going to say, Callie asked a question. Kelly Morrison's tuning in the back channel, and she said, "Hi, Kelly." And she said, she asked the question was, so when we have mentors that disappoint us, so when let me just find it. I just lost as I've been looking through the streams. She asked, is it talking about a female mentor, Nora? You mentioned that she let you down. What about the male mentors who've disappointed? Is it different, and what does that mean? Or is there an expectation one way or the other?
Oh, I got one.
Tanya, do you want to jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tanya, you've been real quiet.
Well, we didn't get to me, so no worries. You guys finish that train of thought.
So I had a professor early in my graduate career, I have to be careful about what I'm saying, who wowed me in every single way in class. And I was like, wow, this changed my outlook on life. This is incredible. And it felt like it was a mentorship. But then later, in different roles, the things that were taught in class were completely not the way this person operated at all. And I mean, it went from, oh my God, I love you, you're the best, this is great, to, oh, ouch, that hurts, that's not what we learned, to like a couple of times later being like, okay, no, we're done now. And it took me a long time. I just, like a puppy, I had been following this person in their work, and it was just like, oh yes, okay, yeah, I'll do that, and I'll do that, and I'll do that. And it was just like, you know, when your puppy jumps up on you and you're not supposed to, you kind of boop their nose and say no. I just kept getting booped until I was to the point where I was like, wow, that completely undid 40% of my graduate career. What do I do now? And I think I'm still coming to terms with that a little bit. That kind of disappointment, that teaching that didn't mean anything. I am very fortunate, I want to be very clear, that I got into a PhD program and had an advisor in Dr. Steve Weiland, who was the complete opposite. He was like, here's what we're going to do. He sat with me every week. He went over my work. He did what he said he was going to do, and he helped me not be the silly graduate student, you know, like that I tended to be because I didn't know any better. So to go from that disappointment to that, oh my goodness.
So here's the thing, what you just said is we put a lot of expectation maybe on mentors, but really we know that mentoring, or maybe we don't know, is actually driven by the mentee.
And I didn't know. I had no idea. I had no idea until I got to my PhD program. I thought, oh, this is what this is supposed to be. But even driven by the mentee, the whole thing was in class, this thing, this philosophy, and in real life, viewing that philosophy was not being lived up to, as opposed to getting to my PhD program, this is the philosophy all the way through. It was stark.
I think you bring up a great point about sort of this like intellectual attraction that we can have with people, and especially in graduate school, and seeking them out to be our mentors because we have very similar, you know, they have a skill or an intelligence in a certain area that you're very attracted to. I think for me in graduate school and finding my mentors, there were a few things. One, because I'm a post-positivist and a scientist and, you know, social scientist and quantitative, a lot of the women did not have any interest in being my mentor because I was not from an interpretive or critical or postmodern paradigm, because I did not want to study emotion or feminism or women's issues or these sorts of things. So I sort of was doing sort of, you know, the old white man's research, which they weren't really interested then in mentoring me in any sort of way, which was a little, you know, hurtful, I'd have to say, because I didn't feel that we needed to have the same methodology or paradigmatic stance in order to be mentored. And then I felt very much by junior faculty at the time when I was a grad student, as there was sort of this a little bit of competition resentment thing going on, and I just was, you know, desperate for a mentor. So I found a lot of times, you know, the traditional post-positivist social scientists who were men were the ones that were mentoring me through my graduate program. I think a second piece of that was the fact that I was, you know, low income, first generation, looking for mentor not only intellectually and in my academic career, but also in life, as you guys had alluded to. I didn't know about any of these sorts of things, how to work political systems, to be politically correct, benefits, just life skills. So it was really great to have mentors, participate in that piece with me. And majority of my mentors, we became great friends. It wasn't just, almost they became like parents to me, since I don't have any parents. So it was great to sort of have that piece of it too. So there was some sort of emotional life needs that can be met by mentorship as well. And I continue to, I think, have those sorts of mentoring relationships. So anyways, that's my little story. But there was this great article out maybe like 5 years ago. I don't know if you all saw it. I know part of the reason we wanted to do this because so many men were interested in our podcast and our on-site sessions that we've had at conferences. But there was this study that came out like 5 years ago, and it was like why women don't mentor women. And it was because a lot of women who broke through the glass ceiling or sort of forged the way for us had a really difficult time making it happen. And they sort of felt like, younger women need to make their own dues. And I think there is sort of resentment thinking at this point that we sort of have it easy. And so they're less likely to spend time mentoring younger women. I'll try to look up the article and tweet it out. But yeah, it was actually an empirical study that they did of women and more or less why you don't mentor.
Well, and I wonder how, I think the two women who really let me down were not satisfied with their careers or their lives, and they hadn't really situated themselves within themselves in their career, so that I think they looked to me for some kind of validation because they were still struggling with their own role in whatever the educational organization I was. It was at two completely different places. Whereas I believe women who are confidently situated in their own structure could probably be mentors for anybody, which is true of the men we know. And I think...
That's a great point, because a lot of times men are more comfortable in where they are, and women are less, I don't want to say comfortable, but maybe feel less secure.
Yeah, so I have found that I'm here, I belong here, I've got a voice here.
Yeah, so I have found women sort of wanting to not mentor me, but sort of take ownership over me and what I am doing. And even to the point of, possibly taking ideas that I presented and passing them on, or taking credit for work that I've done. And so that's really interesting. And I always chalk that up to being in an organization that does not make women feel secure in their positions or their contributions. And that's really disappointing that that's how some organizations still operate.
And I just wanted to circle back to the advocacy point where, in some of the other podcasts we've talked about the male organizational structure and how the structure itself doesn't support women. And I think, early in my career, for example, when I was, married and pregnant and about to give birth to my first child, I had a male boss, and he went out of his way to, help me get an extended maternity leave. And I think, again, things like that are really important. Those are the barriers that women face, just the things that help us balance our life.
Yeah.
When I wanted to go back for my MBA, he went, even though I was an engineer and it was kind of shunned to have an engineer go back for the MBA, he went to bat for me, but that made me more loyal also to him. So it's definitely a kind of a win-win where somebody's going to bat for you, you're more willing to give a little something extra, but it also kind of planted that seed in me of, this is how things work. This was early in my career, so that kind of planted that seed of, oh, okay, this is how you develop relationships and navigate.
But that is partly probably impacted the way you lead. My old director, Bob Coletta, who founded my old center, greatest guy ever, same thing. When I had my first and only child, very much had this families first philosophy in our unit, and very much prioritized care. So, when I was having this child like you, we didn't get paid leave or any of those cool things because I work for the state of Wisconsin. but very much was like, take what you need. If you need a flexible schedule, these sorts of things, just whatever you need, you know, and just that was sort of throughout our unit. If you're sick, take care of you. If somebody in your family is sick or whatever is going on, take care of that. And I know when I became the director of the unit, I tried to continue that sort of cycle of family first. So even though our institution might have different values, I know that in our unit that we were still able to have those values, and that he taught me the importance of putting care first, having those relationships within your team. And you're right, in return, I think it did have a great impact on our commitment to our organization. I don't know if the rest of you feel that way.
A good question from Michael Berman, who said he was flying, but hello, Michael. He said, I wonder if the panelists had experience mentoring men. And so we talk about men who supported us, and that's the topic, is support. So it doesn't even have to be a mentor. I think of support in terms of, I make sure that, like, people in my life make sure I get fed. So my husband does that. He's a great chef. I'm very grateful. And Tanya knows, and Gus knows, and like, he's the cook of the house, and make sure that I'm taken care of in different ways. And so, but Michael's asking a good point, is how about us reaching to other people, and have you mentored? What does that look like? Because the article I shared, it's a couple of years ago, but Emery Klotz shared it, was the one where men's leadership skills suck, and women are supposed to, quote unquote, communicate their vision effectively, empower and mentor subordinates, and approach problems solving in a different way, like transformational leadership. So I think doing that for men.
Sorry. Some of you know my colleague Dylan Barth, who was my associate director. Yeah, yay, Dylan. You know, yeah, I mean, I think I was in every sort of way try to be a mentor to him. You know, in exactly that, sharing the vision with the unit, but also having dialogues. And I felt like, you know, his perspective and his intellect made such an impact on the work that I did as well, the vision for a unit. It was very collaborative. And I also tried to provide him with lots of opportunities. For example, the ELI leadership, and he could attend, you know, different responsibilities which were in line with his interests, and later turned over lots of the things I did to him, like the UWM Faculty Development Program, which is very valuable at our campus and a very high stakes initiative. And so I think I really tried that. I don't know, maybe we should invite Dylan to the show. But
and I think there's something about when you don't have scarcity, you can bring people along.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did the same. I don't think there was a gender like male versus female. I mean, I feel with my colleague Nicole Weber, you know, and others as well, I've mentored them to the best of my ability because I want to see them grow and succeed and be happy and take on new things and be challenged very authentically. And maybe sometimes you don't, you know, always see that.
You mentored me in that way. And in the mentorship/advocacy, so Laura brought up an interesting point earlier. I had no idea how to fight for the academic mentorship I needed, but I had the professional mentorship all along. And I also have to be careful about how I say this. I have two friends in my life who we basically grew up together in the organization that we're in. Mm-hmm. And they're both males, and they advocated for me and mentored me through things like sexual harassment. I mean, like, just throughout my entire career and through some really tough stuff. And recently, we have a new hire in our department who just emailed me and said, hey, I'm trying to build my network on campus, and I asked this person, and, you know, they said, you're the person to talk to. And so I think we kind of came up advocating and mentoring each other, and now I've got this male in IT kind of asking me to mentor him, which I just kind of, like, I got this last week, and that's one of the things I went into Ryan's office with. I was like, Ryan, it has to be a mentor. You know, like, what do I do? And I think that kind of opened my eyes, and I was so excited about having this podcast this week to get to say, you know, like, things are changing a little bit, but just, I guess, growing up together as leaders and as professionals was a phenomenal opportunity, and I'm very thankful to have them in my network and development.
I mean, I recently had a male colleague ask to have me mentor him. It was part of a mentor program, and people could pick who their mentor was. And it's been a great experience. But I think I think when somebody, whether male or female, when somebody says they want you to be your mentor frequently, or like, really, like, but I mean, it's been great, and I think, the relationship that we've developed and the way that we've worked together, it's not gender specific. It's just been it's been a great relationship. I think we've both learned a lot from one another. And even more than gender, sometimes I think it can be age. Like, we forget somebody younger can mentor somebody older. I think that we always feel like it should be somebody that's further along than you in your career, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, I know. I think that's true. I was a mentor for someone else, but it was about pathways and careers in higher ed, and she wanted to get into beyond. She was in accessibility. She wanted to look at learning and development areas and how that would be supported and connected to other folks that and that's, I think, something we do really well. And I don't know if it's mentoring, but I think the support side of things, supporting others in career, because mentoring can be a long-term thing or longer-term thing, but support and connection and maybe direction or guidance to go somewhere. And I think that's always been.
I think a lot of times too, it's the perspective that you get beyond age. So I love the multiple perspective and talking to folks that are younger than me, colleagues, and so forth. Because sometimes, we get stuck if we've been in a position so long. Everyone's thinking politics and procedure and can't move on. So it's nice sometimes when somebody has a fresh look or says, and has this sort of enthusiasm for something, to, bring that to the table.
Hey, Laura, you've been tweeting like crazy. Do you want to talk about stuff or tell us what's on the Twitters?
Well, no, I was just kind of giving some shout out. I will say, before I leave this and forget this, Elizabeth Hubble will gladly come to Colorado wine country anytime. We actually were expressing our love of hiking earlier. And
yes.
Don't get off the plane and go directly to the top of the highest mountain.
I will say Cali, Montana, I'm not out for the Red Ants, who also liked it, this music festival, July 28th to 31st. We're not opposed to that.
July 28th is my birthday.
Exactly, so we have to go celebrate. So, no, I think about support and structures, and I think as we think about women in higher ed, it's not always your supervisor, and it's not always I think about peers, and you said growing up with. I said your peers are actually your support people around you, and they're the ones that you go and have. Like we used to have, we used to call it the TV Finder Club, so Finder Book Club, the Finder TV Club, and talk about TV, but then talk about issues and touch base on like a Friday morning coffee. Or are you making time and space in your own schedule to do that besides the next meeting or the next thing you got to get to? And you have to carve out time for yourself to do that, and whoever else you're supporting with or is being supported. And don't be shocked that anyone asks any of you to be mentors ever. That's not a surprise. Don't say that.
I only said it because it was funny the way he emailed, like, "Hey, so and so told me to email you." What surprised me is the language was, "I'm trying to build my network, and you're the person to know." And I went, I don't know what I'm doing. I guess I should figure that out, So that was the surprise was, but we're going for coffee soon. And your time common is so important. I don't see those guys nearly as much as I should, and we always try to make time for coffee and whatever, and it's really hard, but we need to revisit that and make sure that we're carving that out.
I really think, like this person emailing you and so forth, when somebody refers to me as a mentor or asks me to mentor them, it's such a compliment. And I'm laughing about what you posted on my Facebook the other day about inability to deal with emotions or compliments, because we all know that's a challenge for me. But I mean, I think that's exactly what it is. And so what a great compliment when somebody looks at you as holding a value of which they would like to, be a part of. So I think that's really amazing, and I'm always humbled about it. I just want to switch gears for 1 sec, and just because I had some notes here, and I just want to talk about a couple of themes from bad experiences of mentorship, and maybe just if you're going to be a mentor, things to avoid. So the first one was the thing that I was talking about, and that is sort of trying to own the people you're mentoring. You know, like Jess's success in any way has something to do with me, and therefore, you know, I will claim that as my own. That ownership over that, I think, is just ridiculous. I think the second thing is when we're mentors and we try to be prescriptive and tell people what to do rather than helping them grow. You know, when you talked about Ryan and your meeting, it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue to help you figure out what you want to do. It's not telling people what to do in their career or in their lives. I really just cannot stand the prescriptive advice, like you will do this, you should do that. My third thing I would just say is the patronizing.
Hey, man, over here, yeah.
I think I found a lot of times, and I have a specific experience at my institution when I became the director, is that a couple of males came out very much and feeling like they were my advocates and supporters of mine, and really at the end it really came down to the fact that I felt like patronizing me and recommending that I attend certain professional development, and not realizing that my doctorate work was interdisciplinary in management and public administration, and I a scholar in Org Com. So certain things are not going to be working for me, and without even knowing anything about me, you know, it was just very patronizing. So I just would say, you know, avoid ownership, avoid being prescriptive, and avoid being patronizing. So
just to follow up on that quick, I think you're right. And it's really about listening, and not talking, and asking questions, and trying to. I mean, you know, we talk about the way we teach. I mean, it's more about guiding a person, but really asking questions and listening to what they need.
And to recall what Nori said earlier, challenging, but without prescribing. I mean, you know, I want somebody to be like, is that really what you want to do? I mean, you know, could you prepare better in this way? Without saying, okay, no, just stop. And all of those things are very important.
And I love and hate when people ask me the hard questions.
Well, and you know, as the oldest person in the group, there are cadences in my life where early in my career, I really didn't know the structure. And when I changed careers, I still needed to kind of come in that in a new way. But the most recent person I approached to be a mentor is somebody who's a couple of years younger than I am. She had recently arrived on our campus, and she had, you know, very, you know, like vice provost position. And I went to her and said, here's the deal. Like, I'm not cut out for a small liberal arts college. I have intentions of advancing my career. I specifically want a mentor to critically look at my application process, the way I promote myself. I want you to read documents. Will you look at me as a woman in my early 50s and help me advance my career from this point forward? Which was really different than the kinds of advocacy and mentoring that I needed 15 or 20 years ago at like different points in my career. So it's ongoing. And you know, even, you know, Michael Berman has had that same, I mean, I've asked him all those same questions. From outside my institution, you know me, you know how I can be emotionally or you know, my personality. How do you help me advocate for myself and, you know, shine my best light for the next part of my career? So there's also some things about mentoring and advocacy that take place throughout your entire professional evolution.
Be ready to hear those things. I mean, that's so true, and it's in the mentorship roles I've had, the hardest thing is when somebody will listen but not hear, and I'm trying really hard to hear as well as listen. And I know I don't hit the mark every time, but the things you just asked for can be very vulnerable in not only asking, but also hearing what people have to say. I love having Tanya and Laura and Patrice and you to just be a mirror for me.
Even on our best hair days ever.
Even on our best hair days.
So true.
So true. And on our worst, where Laura and I are like, oh, hey, look at my hair today. This happened this morning. But, like, you know, it's hard to be that vulnerable. It's hard to hear the hard stuff and then do something about it.
I promise you that if you take it in, if you listen early, so I mean, I can, as I was telling the story earlier, I can tell you what the office looked like when Bob pulled me in and shut the door and said, control your emotions, you cannot die on every hill. And my response, I mean, there was this whole, I mean, I was so defensive and so ready to just say, only good people come to work and care as much as I do. And then, right? And then to just like hold my fists in my lap and just like say, listen and process this for a day or two before you say anything. Like I was learning in my, you know, mid-30s, late 30s, like self-control. It's time for self-control. Don't respond and just listen because you don't know everything. But where I sit now, like the vulnerability is completely different. I know more what I want to do, and I am keenly aware of my deficiencies, and I'm not embarrassed by those. Like I'm just as passionate as I was then, and sometimes you put 3 glasses of wine, and I'm just as spastically passionate in the wrong ways as I was when I was 35. But I've had mentors and advocates and enough experience with myself that I know myself at this point. I know when I look to a mentor what I'm asking. I know when someone advocates for me that they've really advanced me within the organization. So I can't make a giant promise, but I would sort of pinky swear with all 3 of you that I think we're all doing it right. And we're talking about it, and we're vulnerable.
Oh, she doesn't count Tanya.
Oh, Tanya totally
Tanya
counts.
got called out.
Tanya's, yeah, she's committed, and that's what matters the most.
Well, the funny thing about what you said.
Well, the opposite, I would just say, you know, not to like belabor all of our individual relationships, but people who are resistant to anything you have to say, that's the vulnerability we're talking about. People who are resistant to advancing their career with advocacy or input from others, and none of us are at risk of that.
I was in Ryan's office this week.
I like her, like,
sorry.
hands up.
Sorry. I'm sorry I resisted you because you were totally right. And he was trying to help me in a situation. I was like, nah. And then I had to go into his office this week and be like, oops, thanks.
I want to just mention, like, Stephanie Richter is online. She asked the question, and Tanya and I both responded on Twitter, and she said, does mentoring always have to be formal, a formal request, or any thoughts on acting as a mentor without being asked? And, hey, we all probably secretly mentor all the time and support and care, male, female, all around. You were mentioning that earlier.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
So I just was going to comment on that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Patrice.
Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, so there was sort of this back channel conversation going on. Does mentoring have to be formal? And actually, my 2 formal mentoring experiences were awful both ways because there was never really honest engagement. I think informal mentoring is not one has been most successful for me both ways. But I think also, as I had mentioned on Twitter, you know, I just feel like mentoring is something that happens all the time. Like it's just you know, and I think it comes down to respect. This was sort of like what kept coming into my mind. Respecting somebody no matter where they are in the hierarchy, where they are on the, you know, temporal scale of how long they've been in their career, but just having respect for other human beings and having this authentic, like, caring about, you know, other folks. And so, I mean, I'm consistently, and maybe it's just that sort of like problem solver mentality I have, which is not always a good thing if we look at transformative mediation, but that's for another day. But, you know, and just always trying to, you know, hear people and brainstorm with them and problem solve. And so I think that some of us just have like, and natural, like we're always trying to help, we're always trying to problem solve, and maybe that's where that mentoring sort of piece comes in. So I think for me, and everyone else can speak to their own, I found most success from informal mentoring. I feel like mentoring has become a part of life, and I don't think it's gender specific.
You've mentioned things on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it goes back to that question we've posed, what are you going to do to make a difference in somebody's life today? And that just, looking around you, and you're right, not waiting for somebody to ask you, and not, I think, Tanya, you were saying, like, not trying to take, credit for it, but just, seeing somebody and being able to read between the lines a little bit and ask them questions. And I think to the point that you were making, just taking the time to listen to their story, and trying to gain an understanding of what is it that they value, what's important to them, where do they want to go, and what can I do to kind of help them move along. And that, I agree, I think the informal mentoring is at least, if not more, important. But to make that informal mentoring happen, we have to step forward and be proactive about it.
And I would say, I think if you are thinking about formal, I've had 2 formal mentoring experiences, and they've been intentional, and they've been programmed, like they've been part of a formal mentoring program, and it's been odd because it is a different experience. And Tanya, I get what you're saying; it can be fake, but you can also set the parameters up of how that communication goes and what their goal is. And if you're deemed approachable, and I think we do try to do this, I think all of us try to think about that a little bit. We're cognizant of being an approachable person. Sometimes I don't think I am, but then we talk about how do you open up the doorways for different ways of communication.
That's a great point.
For different ways of and so I've thought about, and I've had 2 different people I've mentored, and there have been different intentions, and they've come to that, and I said, let's get you to where you want to be. And I think that's been a directed mentorship. And Robes actually said he's had one formal person offer him, and he was too immature to appreciate or see value in it. And so I'm going to ask him, what would you do if asked now? And someone said, I'd love to mentor you because I see you going places. How can we make this happen to you? And who said that to someone recently? Because I believe we have.
I'm going to jump in and say that it sounds like we have transitioned from our context tonight, which was men who've supported us, and it's naturally gone into a more global conversation about mentors. We're looking at about 3 minutes left for tonight's session, and I'd like to maybe do rants for who has a rant left. But I imagine that one of our next topics will be a more broadly perspective discussion about mentoring that goes beyond the men in our lives and beyond the 3 of us, and we'll figure out when that next conversation will be, because I think we have so much more to say about this. As it stands, we have now 2 minutes left. Anyone want to do a lightning round rant?
Well, I'll just give a quick plug. We could talk about June 29th, our next podcast, at 3 p.m. PST, 5 p.m. CST, and 6 p.m. EST. So
repeat that. June what?
29th.
June what?
29th.
29.
Thank you.
I'm like, thanks for letting me know. I'm so bad.
Where am I that day? A rant. Anyone else?
So my rant is that Laura sent 7 calendar reminders, asked me several times if I really wanted to do it, asked me for sure if I wanted to drive that far. I woke up this morning and drove 5 hours, you guys. That's my rant. And the thing that I'm ranting about is that I didn't get it. I am so happy to hear. I think Laura.
Drum along with the ranting, Laura.
Whew. Laura should be ranting that I don't listen.
And my rant is I'm just thankful to have you all in my life. And you've made a huge.
That's a roast boast.
That's a roast.
Okay, it's not a rant.
It's a boast. It's a boast.
Yeah, okay, and my rant is I still have a lot of wine to drink.
See by the sun in the background, you got plenty of time.
Yeah.
Nice. Tanya, you got a rant? No, come back.
Muted.
I don't like the emojis on my new phone. Hit me up on Twitter or Facebook if you want to see the argument. When I'm thinking yay, I'm thinking yay! That is not the emoji on my new phone.
An iPhone or
No,
an
she's
Android?
not.
Oh.
All right, winos out there, ourselves included. It is 4 o'clock. Thank you for joining our womenwhowine.edu podcast. We'll be here again on June 29th, as Laura has promised us, and we will continue our
calendar invite
conversation about mentoring at a future date. Good night, everybody. Wherever you are, hoist a glass of wine.
Cheers.
Cheers.